Tehran, August 26, 2025. Iran has vowed strong reciprocal measures after Australia expelled its ambassador, accusing Tehran of involvement in antisemitic arson attacks in Sydney and Melbourne. The announcement came during a tense weekly press conference where Iran's foreign ministry spokesman, Esmaeil Baqaei, addressed both the allegations and broader international pressures facing the country. His statements reflected a mix of outright rejection, indignation, and warnings that Tehran would not sit idly in the face of what it views as unjustified diplomatic actions. The case has heightened tensions between Tehran and Canberra, with both governments trading diplomatic barbs. For Australia, the decision to expel the Iranian envoy was framed as a response to what it described as mounting evidence linking Tehran to acts of arson targeting Jewish community centres. For Iran, however, the move represents a violation of diplomatic norms and an attempt to pressure the Islamic Republic amid its already strained relations with Western nations. At the centre of the controversy is the press conference delivered by Esmaeil Baqaei in Tehran. Facing a room of journalists, Baqaei sought to deliver a message of defiance and clarity. He was firm in his dismissal of the accusations and equally determined to emphasise that Iran would not remain passive. In his remarks, Baqaei was asked about the potential for renewed European sanctions under the framework of the 2015 nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, which has long been under dispute. He directly addressed the matter with an unequivocal response. Esmaeil Baqaei said, "We will not allow this issue to become a tool of psychological warfare against our citizens." The statement drew attention not only for its rejection of sanctions threats, but also for the broader implication that Iran sees such moves as attempts to destabilize public confidence at home. The spokesman's remarks revealed Tehran's perception that sanctions and political pressure are designed to weaken Iranian resolve, an interpretation that resonates deeply within its domestic narrative. By casting the issue as psychological warfare, Baqaei was signalling that Iran interprets these measures not just as political tools, but as instruments meant to undermine its sovereignty and internal stability. When the discussion turned to Australia's expulsion of Iran's ambassador, Baqaei sharpened his tone. The decision by Canberra was condemned outright, and Tehran's stance was made clear. Esmaeil Baqaei declared, "Basically, any inappropriate and unjustified action on diplomatic level will have a reciprocal reaction." This development is a new one. My colleagues are reviewing the issue to decide on the way to respond to this, but the accusation that is made is absolutely rejected. These words underscored two critical points. First, Iran's rejection of the allegations, and second, the certainty that Tehran will retaliate diplomatically. While Baqaei did not specify what form that retaliation would take, his emphasis on the word reciprocal strongly implied that Iran would mirror Australia's move by expelling its envoy or implementing countermeasures of similar weight. The backdrop to this unfolding diplomatic clash is complex. Australia's accusations stem from a series of arson attacks on Jewish centres in Sydney and Melbourne, which authorities have linked to suspected Iranian-backed networks. While Canberra insists its intelligence supports these claims, Tehran views them as politically motivated fabrications designed to align Australia more closely with Washington's hardline stance. Observers noted that Baqaei's careful phrasing about colleagues reviewing the issue suggests that Tehran is considering multiple pathways of response. Options could include expelling Australian diplomats, reducing bilateral relations, or leveraging its alliances in the region to apply counter-pressure. The ambiguity was likely intentional, leaving room for manoeuvre while sending a firm warning that Iran would not let the matter slide. The press conference also highlighted the increasing convergence of diplomatic, security, and nuclear-related disputes surrounding Iran, with European nations threatening to invoke a sanctions snapback mechanism under the 2015 nuclear deal. Tehran is already on edge. The potential for such sanctions would represent a significant economic and political setback, further isolating the country. Baqaei's comments framed these threats as part of a coordinated campaign of psychological and political coercion. At the same time, the Iranian spokesman's insistence that accusations from Australia were absolutely rejected reflects the broader defensive posture Tehran often adopts in international forums. The choice of words suggested a complete denial rather than even partial acknowledgement, indicating that Iran sees this as a red line issue. The diplomatic dispute comes at a moment when Iran is already facing heightened scrutiny. Its nuclear program continues to alarm Western powers. regional tensions remain volatile, and domestic unrest occasionally flares due to economic pressures. Against this backdrop, the confrontation with Australia may appear minor, but it carries symbolic weight. Australia's expulsion of an ambassador is a rare and severe diplomatic action, signalling just how seriously Canberra views the allegations. Within Iran, Baqaei's words were also carefully crafted to project strength domestically. By promising reciprocal action, the government is sending a message to its citizens that it will defend national pride and not bow to what it views as external humiliation. This plays into a long-standing narrative in Iranian politics, the idea of resistance against Western pressure and protection of sovereignty at all costs. Yet, beneath the rhetoric lies a difficult balancing act. Iran must decide how far to escalate without risking complete diplomatic isolation. Its ties with Australia, while not as strategically significant as those with Europe or China, nonetheless represent another link to the global system. A tit-for-tat expulsion risks further alienating Tehran from international engagement, something that could prove costly given its fragile economic situation. The expulsion also reverberates beyond bilateral ties. Other Western governments will be watching closely to see how Iran responds. If Tehran retaliates aggressively, it may encourage allies of Australia, such as the United States, the United Kingdom and European states, to adopt similar measures. This could set off a chain reaction of diplomatic downgrades and expulsions, deepening Iran's isolation. Meanwhile, Baqaei's dismissal of sanctions threats reveals Tehran's intent to portray itself as unafraid. By framing sanctions as psychological warfare, he implied that Iran sees such tools as less about genuine enforcement and more about creating fear. This framing may resonate domestically, where resilience in the face of hardship has become a recurring theme in state rhetoric. The broader context also matters. Australia's move came as part of a global environment where governments are increasingly willing to act against perceived threats linked to Iran. From Europe to North America, suspicions of Tehran's involvement in hostile activities abroad have fueled diplomatic crises. The accusations of arson in Sydney and Melbourne feed into this pattern, making the case more than just a bilateral spat. For Iran, however, the rejection of these accusations is central to protecting its international image. Accepting any culpability would be politically disastrous, opening the door to broader punitive measures. Thus, Baqaei's insistence that the accusations are absolutely rejected is not only diplomatic posturing, but also a necessary stance for Iran to maintain consistency in its messaging. Analysts suggest that Iran's next steps will be crucial. If Tehran limits its response to verbal protests or symbolic gestures, the crisis may fade without major consequences. But if it opts for expelling Australian diplomats or taking harsher steps, the dispute could escalate quickly. This calculation will depend on Tehran's assessment of the risks versus the benefits of a strong retaliatory signal. As the press conference concluded, the sense was clear: Iran is on the defensive, but determined to project strength. Baqaei's words echoed with a combination of denial, defiance, and caution. His statements underscored the seriousness with which Tehran views Australia's move, but also reflected Iran's broader struggle against Western political and economic pressure. Esmaeil Baqaei said, "We will not allow this issue to become a tool of psychological warfare against our citizens." Esmaeil Baqaei added, "Basically, any inappropriate and unjustified action on diplomatic level will have a reciprocal reaction." This development is a new one. My colleagues are reviewing the issue to decide on the way to respond to this, but the accusation that is made is absolutely rejected. These two quotes are likely to dominate headlines, encapsulating Tehran's dual message of resistance and rejection. They offer a clear window into how Iran intends to handle both the specific case of Australia's expulsion and the broader pressures it faces from the West. Ultimately, the unfolding dispute illustrates the fragility of Iran's diplomatic standing and the risks of escalation in a world where accusations and expulsions are becoming increasingly common tools of international politics. The coming days will reveal whether Tehran chooses measured restraint or decisive retaliation.
سلام.
میخواستم موضعتون رو نسبت به پیشنهاد آمریکا برای تشکیل کنسورسیوم منطقه‌ای برای غنیسازی خارج از ایران بدونم. ممنونم.
همچین پیشنهادی مطرح شده؟
بله، خبرگزاری. حتی راجع به قرنطینه
on the possibility of a sanctions snapback, which European powers have threatened to impose under the moribund 2015 nuclear deal. We will not allow this issue to become a tool of psychological warfare against our citizens. Basically, any inappropriate and unjustified action on diplomatic level will have a reciprocal reaction. This development is a new one. My colleagues are reviewing the issue to decide on the way to respond to this. But the accusation that is made is absolutely rejected.
این موضوع تبدیل به یک ابزار جنگ روانی علیه ذهن و روح شهروندانمون بشه. قاعدتاً هر کنش نامناسبی و ناموجهی در سطح دیپلماتیک واکنش متقابلی رو در پی خواهد داشت. این تحول جدید هست. همکاران من مشغول بررسی موضوع و تصمیم گیری در مورد نحوه پاسخ ما هستند. اما اتهامی که مطرح شده مطلقاً مردود هست